The nomadic lifestyle can be a pretty incredible experience for many people, but nearly everything in the nomadic life is different from in traditional living arrangements. How do you minimize that stress so you can enjoy the nomadic lifestyle? Well, we'll talk about that and more coming up. Welcome to the Robert Witham Show, a weekly podcast where we discuss travel, nomadic lifestyle, simple living, and minimalism. I'm your host, Robert Witham. Thank you for joining us in this episode. Well, there are a lot of adjustments involved with becoming a nomad, with settling into the nomadic lifestyle, and it can cause people a lot of stress. One of the things I always try to do is to share honestly the ups and downs, not just the picture-perfect Instagrammable moments, so that anyone who's listening to any of my podcasts or watching any of my videos is seeing both sides of the equation so that they can make an informed decision for themselves and know what to expect. And in this podcast episode, I will share 10 of my top tips for new or aspiring nomads. But first, before we get into that, let's talk about some nomad news from this last week. Outside Magazine has an article titled Laws Targeting Vehicle Campers Could End Dirt Bagging. A link to that article will be in the show notes. The article discusses how many outdoor subcultures, notably climbing, skiing, surfing, have long embraced dirt bagging, that is, primitive camping at trailheads, parking lots, etc., frequently in a vehicle, but not necessarily. So they've often embraced that, and that's been a part of those subcultures. There's some overlap with those of us who do like van dwelling and stuff. I often just pull into a parking lot, and I'm actually recording this sitting in a little pull-off on the side of a road that used to be, it looks like it used to be a main paved road north-south here in southern Utah, and it's actually, they put the interstate in, and now this road's pretty much been abandoned, and it's on BLM, but I just pulled in and parked in a parking lot. So it's not like it's an established campground or anything, but it is BLM, and I believe it's open for dispersed camping. It generally is on BLM unless it's posted as restricted. So I'm kind of doing that myself right now. Sometimes I'm staying in legit places. Other times I'm just dirt bagging, just parking wherever I can find a place to legally park. The article also discusses how a number of locations in the U.S. and Canada are cracking down on sleeping in vehicles, either through new ordinances or more aggressive enforcement of existing ordinances. So there were a lot of places that were popular with outdoor enthusiasts, and they may have technically had rules about sleeping in vehicles and unofficial campsites, but nobody really made a big deal out of it unless you were causing a problem. And so a lot of the places are cracking down, even if they ignored it in the past. But also, it's not just outdoor enthusiasts anymore, like skiers and surfers and climbers and stuff who are doing dirt bagging, or what we often call boondocking. It's also van lifers, RVers, a growing population of vehicle homeless. That is, folks who aren't trying to do this, but they ended up losing their apartment or house and have nowhere else to go as they're in just sleeping in a vehicle. Workers in expensive resort and tourist areas. These areas bring in tons, sometimes thousands of workers each summer or each winter, whenever their tourist season is, and housing is often so ridiculous that they cannot afford it, or there just isn't enough to go around, period, and there aren't enough housing units for everybody that's trying to work there, and so they end up sleeping in vehicles, dirt bagging, or doing some unofficial boondocking as well. So it's kind of a lot of there's a growth in people who are trying to do that at the same time. Again, check the show notes for a link if you want to check that article out to read more about that. I also want to talk about National Public Lands Day. This is every year, the fourth Saturday in September is National Public Lands Day. This year it's going to be September 28th, 2019. So that's this Saturday coming up. It is the largest single-day effort in support of U.S. public lands. And there will be a variety of activities across the country organized and projects from trail maintenance to cleanup operations to all kinds of things. So links to the show in the show notes again to that website if you want to learn more or to get involved this year yourself. So that being said, top 10 tips for nomads. These are some of my top tips for nomads based on my experience and values. Leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or in the show notes on my website at robertwitham.com with a comment about your tips and what you think are some important tips for nomads. So kick it off with number one: have a plan. Where are you going? How far do you want to travel per day? What are some of the places you want to see? What are some possible places to camp? Preferably multiple options. Deborah likes to say have a plan, then have a backup plan, and have a backup plan for your backup plan, because sometimes you need that. So and also maybe have a time frame based on seasons. So I'm doing this trip from Wyoming to Nevada and then to Arizona, and I have a plan roughly based on when the weather's typically going to be what I consider okay in the places I'm going. And actually, because I've had some campsite fails, I've made at different points in this trip, I've made a little more mileage than I expected or had planned. So I'm kind of watching the weather in front of me and trying to slow down again, put the brakes on again right now to not get where it's going to be too hot. So I have an overall plan from the time I left Wyoming of kind of where I wanted to be in different places, so that I could kind of pace that to not end up somewhere too hot. Why have a plan? Well, it saves fuel, which is pretty expensive. I've been seeing around $3 a gallon on average, or a little better on this trip. I'm fortunate to get 18 miles a gallon in this van. That's a lot better than some people get. A little bit less than some people if you're in a minivan or a small vehicle. But fuel adds up, saves mileage, and mileage tends to translate into maintenance costs and wear, the wear and tear, and also possibly save you from frustration. Like, for example, if I didn't have a plan, I might end up in too low of an elevation in the desert too early and be really uncomfortable because it's very hot, and then my computers and phones aren't working well. The thing, electronics I use, the camera doesn't like the heat, so I'd be frustrated because I'd have trouble working at least a good chunk of each day because it was so hot. So it can help avoid frustration. So having a plan is number one. Number two, on the flip side of that, stay flexible, because things will often not go as planned. Sometimes that campsite doesn't work out, and then the next one doesn't work out either, and so you end up having to travel a little further than you planned. But at the same time, those are some of the negatives that come up, and other things can come up as well. You can get up to a spot at more than 10,000 feet and figure out you can't breathe and you have to go down the hill. So things don't always go as planned, but at the same time, unexpected opportunities will arise. You'll get an opportunity to meet somebody, or you'll get an opportunity to do some cool thing you didn't expect to do. I accidentally ended up at Colorado National Monument recently while looking for a campsite, and I said, oh, what the heck, I'm going to check it out. I don't even know what this place is, but they made a national monument out of it. It must be something interesting, and it was very, very cool canyons. So check out that video if you haven't already. You'll probably enjoy it, I think. That's just outside of Grand Junction if you're ever traveling across I-70 in western Colorado, and not nearly as busy as some of the more popular national parks and national monuments. That's kind of nice. You know, a little more chance to enjoy things without as many crowds. So stay flexible, because things don't always go the way you think they're going to go, for good or bad. Number three, leave no trace, or preferably leave it even better than you found it. There's something I've noticed, and I've seen other people talking about this, is that once a site gets cleaned up good, if it's been trashed before, once it's cleaned up, it tends to stay clean for a while. And there's just something about once the site starts getting trashed and abused, and people start driving where they're not supposed to be driving and things like this, that it seems like other people come along and feel like it's no big deal to trash it because it's already trashed. So that if we at least want to leave it so that there's little to no evidence we've been there, but even better if you can clean it up a little while you're there if it needs it, that actually can help keep things clean going forward. And there's a huge issue here with public lands being closed down, and sometimes the reason is because it's being trashed and abused, and people aren't behaving themselves, and the National Forest Rangers or the BLM Rangers don't have the resources to patrol everything and to take care of everything, and so they end up just shutting areas down because it's abused. So leave no trace, and hopefully that keeps things open for everyone to enjoy in the future, including those of us who are there. We can come back again in the future and enjoy it another time. Number four, watch the weather forecast. When you're in a house in town, it may be a little inconvenient or uncomfortable, if it's super hot or super cold or crazy rain or snowstorm comes, whatever, when you're out here traveling on primitive roads, camping in remote locations, watching the weather forecast is a big deal and knowing what to expect. At minimum, it helps you stay comfortable because you can reposition before it's too hot or too cold, or you're stuck in a snowstorm or several days of rain or high windstorms, and dust storms. But it also can help to avoid unpleasant situations and possibly even avoid dangerous situations. You don't want to be out somewhere and be stranded for longer than you wanted to be there or longer than you have resources to be there, and you don't want to be stuck because you got a couple inches of rain and it washed out the primitive road you came in on. I was looking for a campsite on a mountain up here not too long ago, didn't find anything up there, but they have a big sign right at the bottom says that this road is impassable during winter weather. Well, I totally believe it, having been up there, but if you had a surprise storm came in the spring or in the fall, you might be stuck for a good while because of the road conditions. So watching the weather forecast can help you stay comfortable and help keep you out of trouble. Number 5, be prepared. Have plenty of food and water always. Just don't let yourself run out of that. Make sure you have enough when you're going out camping somewhere, that you have enough food and water for the time you plan on being there, and then some as a buffer, so that if you end up staying longer than you expected, or you just want to stay longer than you expected, but if you end up having to, because for one reason or another, you've got enough food and water. It's not an emergency situation. Make sure you have adequate fuel. There's no gas stations out these backcountry roads, and depending on which way you go out, it may be longer than you think to the next gas station, or occasionally there'll be, again, talking about natural disasters, you get a storm comes in or a wildfire or something like that, you may have to evacuate quickly, and you don't want to be worrying if you're low on fuel and you're going to be able to get to a fuel station to get supplies, and so you want to make sure you have fuel. Medications, if you need any medications, make sure you've got them so you don't run out when you're out, or if you're delayed getting to a pharmacy again. It's a good idea to have a battery booster, or at least a portable solar panel so you can recharge your starting battery if you end up with a dead battery. You're out 5 miles from pavement and your battery dies, you're kind of stuck. And if you have a cell phone, you can call for help. It's probably very expensive to get somebody to come out and jumpstart you way out on a Forest Service road or a BLM road. So having a battery booster, they're relatively inexpensive. They're compact, don't take up much space. That'll allow you to hopefully get your vehicle started again. If you have a portable solar panel, if you have the solar controller on it still, you can potentially hook that up to your battery and recharge that way. It might take you all day, but at least you can get it recharged and get started, hopefully. A good idea to have a spare tire at least, and or an air compressor, so you can reinflate a tire if you got a slow leak or something. But basically the key is try and be as self-sufficient as possible, and none of us can be truly 100% completely self-sufficient, but to the extent possible try and be self-sufficient so that when you're out there, so that you can take care of things and get back to where you can get supplies or services again when needed. And number 6, preventative maintenance. Vehicle breakdowns are one of the top fears that people have about the nomadic lifestyle. The best way to avoid breakdowns is to maintain your vehicle in good condition. You start letting the maintenance go for whatever reason, budget, just an aggravation, or just not thinking about it, and you're more likely to run into breakdowns. And it's also a good idea to develop a good relationship with one or more mechanics if you're not able to maintain your vehicle yourself. And what I mean by that is, anywhere you spend a lot of time, it's a good idea to have an established relationship with a mechanic that you like, that does a good job and doesn't, and treats you fairly, because then you know where to go when you're in those areas, and it's going to be easier to get things taken care of. And I realize not everybody spends a lot of time in the same places, but for me, I spend a lot of time in Wyoming and then in southern Nevada and in Arizona, and so it's good to know places you can get some help when you need it. I do a fair bit of work on vehicles myself, but sometimes it's something I don't want to tackle, or it's over my head, or I don't have the tools to deal with, and so then I'll make arrangements to have a mechanic take care of it for me. But staying on top of preventative maintenance one way or another is a really good way to avoid some many emergencies when you break down on the side of the road and have to get towed off or something, and where you break down out in the desert or the forest, and you know, you got to try and figure out how to get your vehicle back to a mechanic, and the tow truck doesn't want to come out there, or if they do, it's exorbitantly expensive. So, you know, taking care of this stuff preventatively is the best way to avoid and at least reduce the incidences of that happening. On a related note, number 7, emergency fund. This is difficult for many people. I understand that. Heck, my own experience is up and down. You know, sometimes I have more, sometimes less, because things happen, you know, and it depletes your funds, and then you got to find a way to save it up again. So it's difficult for a lot of people, but do your best. Even a small emergency fund is better than no emergency fund. But ideally, you want enough money set aside to cover a major repair or replacement of the vehicle. If it's a newer or more expensive vehicle, you probably have insurance on it, but it often doesn't pay out enough. So, you know, you might have some funds then to help offset that, cover sales tax and registration, that kind of things. If it's a less expensive vehicle, you know, you may want to just have the funds to purchase another one that's similar if you need to. And you also want these funds to be available somewhat quickly, because you're probably going to want to, if you break down or need to replace a vehicle unexpectedly, you're probably going to want to be able to get those funds within a day or a few days, not wait a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is to get it out of a you know, long-term savings account or an investment account or something like that. If you do have your funds set aside and something's going to take a while to get, you probably want to have a credit card or something you can use for the repair, and then you can pay that off with, you know, the money. You can get it in a week or 2 down the road, whatever it is. Number 8, be aware of surroundings and environment. Nomadic lifestyle is pretty safe overall, and most people find that over time. I've only run into a few weird situations where there's a problem, and without exception it's been in town or right outside of town. You know, it doesn't come up a lot if you keep your wits about you, but so it's pretty safe overall. But stay alert to possible dangers or threats from humans, wildlife, natural disasters, and so on. You know, if something doesn't feel right, move on. You know, if something seems off, just go somewhere else. And you know, if there's a wildfire coming, or if the weather forecast is talking about inches of rain, you probably want to get on pavement. You know, if there's a fire coming your direction, don't wait until the exits are blocked, because if the wind shifts or something and it blocks your road out, you're stuck. So just be alert to what's going on around you, and be prepared to leave if it comes up. Like I said, overall it's a pretty safe lifestyle, but do be aware of your surroundings and environment. Number 9, have a budget and income plan. So plan your spending within or below your means, and then stick to it. You know, because this is, in this lifestyle, we don't have some of the same buffers we have living in a house. And so if you're, you know, you overspend and your savings are depleted, then you have a problem. I mean, you're in a pinch. You know, you might be broke down somewhere, or I've heard of people running out of gas money, you know, and being stuck, and that's not a situation you want to be in. So have a plan for what you're going to spend each week or each month, and then stick to it. And also have a plan to rebuild your savings as necessary. So you do have to dip into those savings because something goes wrong. You need to have a plan to rebuild that. And some people who are doing this lifestyle are going to have enough, a comfortable enough retirement that it's not much of an issue to them. But for a lot of people, they're on lower income, and this is an issue. You don't want to be stuck somewhere because you don't have the funds to take care of something, and you don't want to be with your emergency fund, your savings depleted, and no way to replenish it. So have a plan for what you're going to spend, and have a plan for how you're going to replenish savings as necessary. And finally, number 10, have fun and enjoy yourself. This is a great lifestyle for many people. It provides an opportunity to develop many friendships with like-minded people and to see incredible places. I've seen some great places just in the last couple of weeks, and some of them were not planned. Just places I stumbled upon. So you know, have fun and enjoy yourself. That's really why we're doing this, anyways, right? For most of us, it's because we want to be able to travel more, see places, and meet people. And so, you know, have fun and make the most of it. What do you think? You agree with my tips? Disagree? Leave me a comment. here on YouTube or on the website, robertwitham.com. In the show notes, let me know what you think and what some of your tips are for nomads if you have some other ideas I didn't mention in my top 10 list. So that brings us to listener questions, and this is the section where I try and address questions and comments from listeners or viewers from the previous episode. So I had a couple I'm going to cover this time, and if you have questions or things you'd like to see my perspective on or whatever, or just like to see discussed here, go ahead and leave a question or a comment here on YouTube or again on my website, robertwitham.com, in the show notes for the podcast episode, and we'll see about including it next week in episode 5. All right, so Guy Martin asked, how would you suggest beginners travel in terms of miles per day, kind of locations to look for, good habits to practice? What made me think about this is when you were talking about not being able to locate a place to stay, whether due to road closure or whatever. All right, so I'll throw a couple quick ideas here. In terms of miles per day, this is going to vary a lot depending on people's preference. On average, people who are new on the road tend to travel more and slow down a little bit after a year or two. That's going to depend on budget and your vehicle condition and interest and other things, but that's kind of an average thing. Is that people are excited, there's so much to see, and they tend to drive a little more. In terms of mile per day, what I'm kind of getting to now that I have a comfortable rig especially, I'm trying to do 50 miles a day, 100 miles a day if I have to, but I'd like to keep it to 30 to 50 maybe. That doesn't always work out, but I started looking for campsites around and researching stuff around that mileage. But then I've mentioned before, I do a custom Google map and plan out possible places to stay from all the way from Wyoming to Arizona. So, and I'm going to be doing a video about that real soon on how I do that to demonstrate that. But when I start out, I'll look and say, okay, what's about 30 or 50 miles down the road, and I'll try and get there. And I might stay there for a day or 2 or 3 or longer if it's a really good spot. But that kind of gives me if the first one or the second one doesn't work out, I'm still not driving all day trying to find a campsite. Kind of locations to look for. This is going to vary a lot on what you're trying to do. I have friends who stay in RV parks exclusively, or they might have 1,000 Trails membership, and they're doing that circuit, going to 1,000 Trails locations, or others do a few other programs like that. Some like to stay in state parks, county parks. Some of us like to boondock. I mix it up depending on what I find. If I can find a nice boondocking spot that's going to give me sun for solar and good cell coverage for work and isn't going to destroy my van trying to get in there, then I'm going to do that first. After that, if that doesn't work, then I'm going to start looking for free or inexpensive county or city parks. Sometimes a state park if it's inexpensive, and then from there, if that doesn't work, I might look at kind of dirt bagging options, like a trailhead that I can park at overnight legally, or a Walmart, or over a roadside rest area that allows overnighting, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the order I work in terms of what I'm looking for, but it's going to depend on each person and what kind of places they like to stay. Some people only boondock unless there's no way around it. Other people, really prefer staying where they got hookups and staying on gravel or pavement. So it's really kind of a personal preference, I think, in that respect. But that's kind of the approach I take in terms of priorities. I think I've only stayed once or twice in actual RV parks since I've been on the road. But I've also traveled in vans and stuff, so RV parks aren't that much fun in a van. I don't think I'd like them in an RV, but especially most of them. Some of them are nice, but a lot of them, they're just a gravel lot anyways. You're packed in like sardines, or a paved lot and you're packed in, and you can't even walk between rigs, some of them. So all that, so you have utilities. So I'm set up to be boondock and to not need utilities, so I just don't have any need to do that, and I definitely don't want to pay $40, $50, $60 a night to do that. But that's me. That's just my preference. Good habits to practice. Well, I just went over 10 of my top tips. I think that probably covers that. But yeah, you do run into challenges of road closures and areas just being closed, or the road's too rough, or there's too much camping pressure there, or it's overrun with ATVs, throwing dust all over the place and noise or whatever it is. So sometimes it doesn't work out and you got to go somewhere else. There was actually several comments following up on Guy's question, and then he followed up with one more comment. I figure to save money, it's good to slow down and spend as much time stopped multi-day as possible. In this case, good locations mean a lot. Exactly. And that is 100% true. And if you can slow down and move slower, you burn a lot less gas and put less miles on your vehicle. And that's a good thing if you're trying to be budget conscious. The more time you spend in one place before you move on, the less miles you're doing. I did some parking lot hopping the last 2 days, and I literally drove about half a mile in 2 days. So just moving. So not my ideal thing there, but it did save some gas and delay some expenditures. And yeah, when you are if you're trying to do that approach, you're trying to stay, the good locations do matter a lot. And it's one thing to stay somewhere for an overnight that's not that great, but if it's not that great, you're probably not going to stay there for a week or 2 weeks. So then it does become more important to find those good places. And that's with the way I've got my system worked out now. If I get to a place and it's like, well, this isn't great, but it'll work for an overnight, then I can just stay there, and the next day I'll just move on and find if I'm trying to find somewhere better. And when I do find that good spot, then I stay there for several days or longer. All right, so, and Deidre Stephenson writes, "Hi Robert, do you think that the popularity and increase of the numbers of travelers is contributing to the difficulty in finding good campsites in some areas, or does it just seem like it to me? Or does it just seem like it is to me because I watch a million videos a week, making it seem like there are millions of travelers out there?" I am exaggerating, of course. Yeah, there is an increase in people doing this, both in RVs and in vans and other more budget-friendly vehicles and options, and I say that based on both anecdotal evidence and on some stats that do come out. Nobody really, as far as I've ever seen, there's no official numbers on van dwellers and that kind of thing. The RV industry is tracked, though, and that has been growing and is expected to grow quite a bit more in the coming years. Now, a recession or something like that could have a huge impact on that, but so far it's been growing, and the expectation is it's going to continue to grow. And yeah, there is a growing movement with van dwellers as well and other vehicle dwellers, and there's also a growth in what's often called vehicle homeless and stuff, people who don't have a choice and they didn't plan to do that, they lost their house and ended up in a vehicle. So there is a growth across the board in people living in or out of vehicles, and that does have an impact in several levels. On one, it creates more pressure in some areas, which leads to them being closed down, especially, like I was saying earlier, if their sites are being trashed or abused, then they get shut down altogether. But because there's you couple, and there have been a lot of closures in the last couple of years in different places for different reasons, but you couple the closures, especially near population centers, with the growth in people doing this, you end up with more and more people packed into fewer places, or people having to go way out further than they used to go, or further than they might want to go, to try and find places with a little bit of space. So there does seem to be a twin set of problems here that are converging to create some trouble. The reduction in available space, and there's still plenty of public land that's open to camping, don't get me wrong, but in certain areas there are some places getting closed, and that does mean fewer areas. And when you got a lot of people trying to camp in a few spots, it does get hard. So those are my top 10 tips and a couple questions from viewers and my thoughts on those questions. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoy this, whether here on YouTube, if that's how you're watching, or if you're listening through a podcast service, subscribe there so you'll be notified when new episodes come out every week. Meanwhile, you can visit robertwitham.com/episode4 for show notes and links. There'll be a link to that in the video description below if you just want to click on that to go there instead. But thank you for tuning into this podcast. I appreciate you joining me for this. That's why I do this. It'd be no point in me doing it if nobody listened or watched. So I appreciate you tuning in and joining me for this podcast. I'll be back next week with episode 5. So thank you, and I will see you then.